In this video, we're going to take a look at a pair of octones that are linked together to make what I like to call a hexadecatone, which I think is a made-up word, but all words are made-up words, so it's fine. Yeah, linking two octones together opens up the capability of duophonic sequencing, among many other things. So this is a 16-step sequence now, as we can see. We've extended the loop, and yeah, we've now got double the CV outputs, double the clock outputs. There are a lot of features added in that get unlocked by linking a pair together, beyond just it being double the step count. So let's see what this can do. I've got a slightly different configuration of modules in this system from the previous video. This way I've got two discrete oscillators, two filters. I'm using a stereo mixer here, a mix from DPW, and that's going to give me a few more options here. So I'm going to take my sawtooth from the A110 oscillator, run that through my ARA, and we're going to go through channel 1 of this stereo mixer. I've got a clouds added in here at the end as well, so that's just adding a little bit of bass, a little bit of ambience, and I've got the pitch tuned up to a perfect octave, so we should get some nice shimmer, granular delay effects if needed, if appropriate. We shall see. Okay, here we go. So that's signal flow patched up. We should have, yep, there we go. Squelchy low pass filter. Bring resonance down a little bit. Yeah, that's sounding good. Nice. Cool. Okay, so this is my single monophonic voice. We have all the steps normal to 0 volts at the moment. What I'm going to do to start with is select minor pentatonic, just because that's a really nice, easy scale to get something very musical off the bat. You'll see that there's actually independent control of the scale selection for the quantisers between the octone pair. This is a bit of a quirk. It didn't make sense for me to limit it and just lock it to only one, but there's a bit of a limitation of what's actually musically useful. Like say you had the left one here set to Ionian major scale, you could set this one to harmonic minor, which you're absolutely free to do, but you might get some weird dissonances in there. So it makes most sense to keep things locked to a common scale. So I'm going to go with minor pentatonic here. And let's start bringing up some notes. Sounds cool. It's amazing how much more melodically can be added by just, of course you're doubling the note, but I feel like the jump from an 8-step sequence to a 16-step sequence, it just opens things up so much more. I guess there's just a lot more melodic real estate in there. Yeah, I find it's quite hard to go back to just a single octone after playing with a pair of them, like this. Cool, okay, so that's my single monophonic voice going through. I'm going to patch up my second oscillator, and let's get a degree of duophony into the mix here. So volt per octave. I'm going to use my PWM voice output, and that's going through the Filtron. Quite a nice contrasting filter to the ARA. What I'll do, I'm going to lock and hold on a step, bring this up. Seems I've got them still quite nicely in tune. Okay, so this is my TSL Filtron voice. And this is my Dope for voice through the ARA. Bring them both up. And what we can do now is place them a little bit and get a bit of panning. quite nicely there. So this is, you know, if I just had a couple of LFOs, I guess I could cycle some envelopes from the Zadar, but yeah, if it's in a bigger system, I might just throw in some free-running LFOs into this over the cutoff frequencies and just get some nice evolving stereo subtractive pads. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Okay, I'll get this dialed into a nice static point. Okay, so let's explore what this pair of octones can add into the mix. So far, this is just a single monophonic sequence, which makes this dual patching a little bit redundant, because I could have just used a Ninja Star or stacking cable or multiple, something like that. But there's a reason, there's a benefit to using the two parallel CV sources, and that is with the right side octones additional features. So the lower direction switch, I've got this set to the left, and this gives a particular behavior to the step pot here. If I put this switch to the right, what this is doing is adding a DC bias sum at the CV output. So if I freeze on a step, then I can use this to tune up an offset of my second volt per octave source. There we go. So I've tuned that up to 1 octave above. Which is quite a nice trick when you're working with layered subtractive voices. Of course, you could also do this if you had you could do this at the oscillator stage, but it means you've got a bit more control earlier on. So, unless I use something with an octave switch. Yeah, it adds a bit of an extra feature. So that's me tuned it to a perfect fifth up this time. So here you can tune it to any offsets. This is 2 octaves up. So there will be a limit here because the CV output of the octone itself is limited to 0 to 5 volts. So we've got this 5 octave range, and this bias will sum with the step point, but it will max out at 5 volts. But I find that's generally okay because, you know, for a musical sequence or a musical melody, if you're stretching beyond an octave, especially if you're stretching beyond 2 octaves, you're pushing what's going to be, you know, particularly musically useful, I would argue. So meaning if you keep like the first couple of octaves for your actual sequence position, then you can easily tune up an octave or two without hitting that cap. Cool, so that is our manual bias, which takes a bit of manual tuning, but it means you're free to dial that into any fixed interval. If I change this toggle switch to the left position, this does it in a slightly different way. So it's still applying a bias, an offset, but it's applying it under the hood internally, summing with the step voltage amplitude before the quantiser. So this means I'm able to push this voltage up and essentially hit other quantization thresholds. So to demonstrate that, let me freeze it on here, and here I'm pushing through this minor pentatonic quantized scale. But now if I set this to a fixed offset where I've got a diatonic tuning, if I now adjust my fundamental step level, because these are both set to the same quantized scale, we're keeping that musical consonance. So this is something of note. you hear I've got this offset set to a harmony, but as I dial up my fundamental note amplitude, we've not got a perfect parallel point at which the new notes change. And that's because this offset is going into a quantized scale, which is not equally devised across the range of the octave. So we've got 12 tone chromatic, and that's divided down to just a pentatonic scale. So there are only 5 available notes across this volt range. So it means that if we get a point where we're going to have a slightly different bit of contrasting note change. Which is quite nice to play with manually. Cool, okay, let's get things a bit more articulate. Let's get some percussion in here. Make sure I've got reasonably quick envelopes. I'm going to clock this first envelope here from my left clock source, and I'm going to put that into my original voice. Slow things down a bit. Cool, and let's do the same with our second clock source. Put that into envelope B. I'll send this into the Filtron. There we are. Very similar envelopes, just slight differences in how steep the exponential curve is. But yeah, the TSL being more of a square wave type tone, it's a really nice organic pluckiness, I find. Let's adjust my sequence a little bit. Pretty cool. Bit of octave pitching, grain delay in there as well. Okay, so far this has just been sequencing more traditionally. I'm going to switch over to my manual. This is where that grain delay is going to come in quite nice. What I'll do here, I'm going to slow down my burst oscillator voices envelope, so this way, same as before with a single octone, I can select what step I'm on manually, and I can manually gate from this clock output, from the retrig. Cool, so yeah, that's an example of using it sort of just manually, just for stored voltages, and because it's two parallel voltages now, it adds quite a lot of capability for diatonic tuned melodies. Cool. Okay, so let's keep it in program mode and explore what's different with 2 octones versus just 1 octone for the step repeat mode. Bring my cutoff frequencies down. So with a single octone, we know we could repeat steps up to 8 times. That is also doubled now up to 16 step repeats, because there's 16 LEDs now, so I was able to really open that up a little bit. So let's put something in as a test. So I'll just max that one out at 16. Let's go 6, then 8. And what I'll do, I'm going to limit my sequence down to 4 steps. A couple of things going on to note. We have regular stepping on the right side, but not the left side. So if I go back to my tune mode, we'll be able to check with the same double tap approach to enable or disable the assignment of the step repeats, triggering the master clock output. There's an extra LED here, so this can also be used for a toggle state for engaged or disengaged to the master clock. So let's try this now. So this should be clocking on every step repeat. Speed up my first envelope a bit. Cool. Okay, so there's something a little bit weird with how the 2 octones master clock outputs behave in a linked configuration, which is a little bit curious, but adds for some interesting capabilities. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to slow down my tempo. Here we're getting these sort of like contrasting rhythmic patterns. Might get more noticeable as I slow things down a bit more. So this is almost like a clock multiplication, which is not inaccurate. So what happens here is the right side octone, it still has its own internal clock, which is defined by its own rate control. And this gets applied to its clock step repeat functionality. If I slow it all the way down, I'm slowing the rate down, so it's going to be basically hard syncing. So if we imagine this clock as being a ramp, this is a slower ramp that's being hard synced in time with the main clock rate, which means that I can actually get forced counts, so essentially multiplications inside this slower tempo. And if I speed it up faster, we can hear it doesn't become a static, sustained clock rate. It's actually becoming a burst. So yeah, the right octone is essentially a burst generator. It's a little bit weird. It's kind of like a compounded use case of the defined parameters. So if I go back here, then this one is 6. Oh, yep, 6. This one's all 16. That one's 2. That one's 8. So what I'll do, I'll take off my step repeats from a couple of them. So that's this one, which is 16, and this one, which is 2. Let's go back to the pattern. In this case, this is taken on it's kind of shifted down the functionality. So this is only clocking once when it lands on this step, but not clocking per step repeat. This one, however, is clocking per step repeat, but it's just doing 1 pulse per step repeat. If we land on one that is clocking, then we're actually getting the number of step repeats as a burst clock per step repeat per step, which I think is the most concise I can describe that. It's interesting, but it means you can get some really interesting rhythmic relationships within a sequence. Let's open up our sequence a bit more. I'll actually go through and I'm going to add in somewhat random amounts of step repeats. Try that, and let's disable some from blocking. Randomize our note selection, go to full 16. So it's related but slightly asynchronous patterns of rhythms between the two. Yeah, it's a pretty powerful feature set when an octone gets doubled into a hexadecatone. There's actually a lot more that I can cover with this, but I'm going to limit it in this video because I don't really have enough modules or a big enough system to do it justice. This has all been with the right octone's lower toggle switch in the left position. That's for the offset control defined by the step spot. The center position and right position are actually two memory banks of 16 slots, which each one of those slots can store a 16-step sequence. So at the moment this is initialized, so everything coming from this right octone is 0 volts. Yeah, I'll leave this for another video because it's a deep dive in itself, but in a nutshell, there are two banks of 16 slots that a 16-step sequence can be saved to. So that's 32 sequences that can be saved and played back from the right octone in parallel to whatever the primary step position is on the left octone. So you've got a real-time sequence as well as 32 saved sequences that you can call from. It's quite a specific use case. The clock input on this side becomes clockwise rotation, and this becomes anti-clockwise rotation for selecting what slot you're in, depending on what bank you're in from this toggle switch. So yeah, it's deep, but I think in this video I wanted to keep it to like the most immediately performable features. So yeah, hope you enjoy.